All right. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are going to take a deep dive into some really big changes happening in U.S. higher education.
Mm.
Looking at you sent us a bunch of reports from NextNow News, and looking through them, as of March 2025 here, it's clear we're seeing some pretty fundamental shifts taking hold.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, we have a situation where, both the financial foundations of universities and the ability of international students and scholars to even be a part of U.S. higher education are undergoing some pretty serious transformation.
Okay, so let's unpack this, for the listener. What we really want to do in this deep dive is try to understand what are the core implications of these developments. What does this mean for students? Whether they're here in the U.S. or thinking about coming here, and what does it mean for the universities themselves and for the wider landscape of academic research? I mean, from what we've pulled together in these reports, two key areas really stand out. First, there are the changes in how the federal government is funding universities, and the potential knock-on effects for financial aid and research activities. And then the second big piece is this whole set of new immigration restrictions and how they're impacting international students, academics, and the whole academic environment.
Yeah, that's a really good way to frame it. I think those are the two primary forces that are reshaping higher education right now.
So let's start with the money, right? The financial side of things. The reports indicate that there have been some major executive actions that have led to big cuts in federal funding for universities. What's driving these cuts?
Well, I think that the central point here is that the administration is moving to really reduce federal funding for universities that they deem to be, not in compliance with certain new federal regulations. And the reports highlight specifically, a real focus on institutions that maintain what are called diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI programs. These initiatives are facing much closer scrutiny now, and the administration is really tying their existence to funding decisions.
And this isn't just a general statement, right? I mean, the reports actually name some very prominent institutions. They mentioned Columbia, Harvard, MIT as being under investigation. So,
Yeah.
what exactly are the feds looking at these universities, and what are the potential consequences?
Well, the investigations seem to be mainly focused on the financial aid practices and the hiring practices at these universities. And the potential outcome is that they could lose, a lot of government grant money, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars. And that kind of a financial blow can really force an institution to rethink its priorities and potentially have to scale back its activities.
Yeah, and it sounds like the impact is already being felt. Really at the graduate level, where we're hearing about universities scaling back research projects and even withdrawing offers of admission. I mean, this is a big deal, for students who are trying to plan their academic futures.
So these funding uncertainties aren't just theoretical, right? I mean, we're already seeing tangible effects on graduate programs. Yeah, and what's really interesting to me is how directly and how quickly this funding uncertainty, is impacting graduate education. One of the reports specifically mentions UMass Chan Medical School, which has reportedly rescinded offers for its biomedical sciences PhD program, and they directly cite the uncertainty surrounding NIH funding and the new 15% cap on indirect costs, and this is we see similar actions. At Iowa State and Harvard's Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, and even the president of MIT has publicly voiced his concerns about the potential impact of these funding cuts.
So, I mean, it sounds like, it feels like STEM, which often rely heavily on federal research grants, could be looking at a noticeable decline in opportunities, which, that could have some pretty serious long-term consequences for innovation in the United States, couldn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you reduce federal funding for research, that directly translates to fewer research projects, fewer resources available for laboratories, and ultimately fewer opportunities for the next generation of scientists and engineers and medical researchers. And I think if we connect that to the bigger picture, this could lead to the U.S. Losing its competitive edge, on the global stage in really crucial scientific and technological sectors.
And the impact isn't just on the research side of universities, is it? I mean, there are also big concerns being raised about Pell Grants, these vital funds that help low-income undergraduate students afford college. The reports mention a projected shortfall of $2.7 billion, which is, I mean, that's a really worrying number. So what could the real-world impact be on individual students who rely on this aid?
Well, it is a huge number, and it's understandable why there's so much concern, about the stability of financial aid for such a large part of the undergraduate student population. And while the Department of Education has said, that financial aid will continue to be available, the fact that there is this underlying budgetary pressure does create a lot of uncertainty, for students and their families who really depend on these grants to make higher education possible.
So if you're a student or a prospective student who's worried about how these funding changes might affect you, like right now, what are the key takeaways from these reports? What kind of advice are the experts giving?
Well, I think that the advice is pretty practical. It really emphasizes, taking proactive steps. So students are being told, to apply for all forms of financial aid and scholarships early in the application cycle. Try to get ahead of any potential delays or increased competition for the money that's available. Exploring private scholarship options becomes even more important, when federal funding is kind of up in the air. And probably most important, just stay informed, stay really closely informed about your chosen university's policies, regarding tuition assistance and any changes that might be coming down the pike. In this kind of situation, information is power, and being proactive can really help.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit now and talk about the second major area that these reports highlight, which is these new immigration restrictions. The report suggests that there could be some really sweeping changes to the Immigration Nationality Act. This sounds like this could fundamentally alter the whole landscape for international students and scholars in the U.S.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the proposed changes, especially the creation of this national origins-based hierarchy for immigration, could really reshape the U.S. immigration system in a very significant way. This whole idea of categorizing countries into red lists and orange lists and yellow lists and green lists, it really indicates a move towards much more restrictive entry policies and a real emphasis on where someone is from.
And the red list, just to be crystal clear for the listener, I mean, it's not just about increased scrutiny or something, right? This is a complete bar on entry for people from those countries, regardless of their reason for travel, even for study. And the reports list, I mean, quite a few countries there. Afghanistan, Cuba, Iran, Libya, North Korea, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Venezuela, and Yemen. That's a pretty substantial list of countries.
Yeah, that's right. The red list means a total ban on entry for citizens of those countries. And the implications of that are pretty far reaching. I mean, not only does it prevent future students and researchers from those countries from even coming to the U.S., but it also has the potential to separate families and disrupt existing academic and professional collaborations. And then, the orange list, which has, severe restrictions for countries like Eritrea, Haiti, Laos, Myanmar, and South Sudan. And then they're even considering, potential partial bans for others like Belarus, Pakistan, Russia, Sierra Leone, and Turkmenistan. So it's a pretty big deal.
So the Trump administration's stated justification for these restrictions is basically centered around national security concerns and what they're saying are deficiencies in the document verification processes of these countries. But the reports also present a counter argument using data from the Cato Institute. What does that analysis show?
Well, the data from the Cato Institute really offers a different perspective, I think, on the security risks. Their analysis indicates that there's actually a very low number of deaths in the U.S. that resulted from terrorism committed by people who immigrated from these countries on these lists. They cite a figure of only 23 such deaths out of over 3,000 total terrorism-related deaths, and the incidents involving individuals from Cuba and Pakistan and Sudan, they happened more than a decade ago. So I think this raises the question, for the listener, does the evidence really support the idea that that these specific countries pose such a significant security threat that it requires a complete or near complete immigration ban. And then, they also point to the fact that incarceration rates among nationals from these countries are actually lower than other immigrant groups. So it's a pretty interesting counterpoint.
So beyond the stated security concerns, what are some of the other wider potential impacts of these immigration restrictions that the reports highlight?
Well, there are concerns about families being separated. Some estimates suggest that over 150,000 spouses and minor children of U.S. citizens could be affected. And then there's, the economic impact. If you restrict the entry of legal immigrants, that can hurt labor markets in certain sectors and potentially slow down economic growth. And then, on a bigger level, I mean, these kinds of policies can strain diplomatic relationships, between the U.S. and these targeted nations as they react to these bans.
So it's understandable that this would cause a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty among international students who are already studying in the U.S. and the reports mention students at Harvard seeking clarification on these new policies. So what kind of guidance are universities giving to their international student communities, or perhaps what kind of lack of guidance?
Well, it seems like there's a growing sense of concern and unease among international students, but the specific guidance coming from the universities themselves has been kind of limited so far. The reports quote students like Zaria A. Ferguson from Jamaica. She's a leader in Harvard's first-year international program, and she's really emphasizing this need for clearer communication from their institutions about what exactly these potential policy changes will mean for the international academic community. And I think this lack of clear and timely information just makes the uncertainty and the fear that much worse for these students.
And the situation at Brown University with the deportation of Dr. Rashad Alloway really, brings home the potential consequences here, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the case of Dr. Alloway, who was a medical school professor at Brown, she was on an H-1B visa and she was deported to Lebanon. Even though a federal judge had ordered her deportation stayed. So it's a very concerning development. And then Brown issued a warning to its international students and staff, basically advising them to reconsider any non-essential travel outside the U.S. because of this incident. So it really underscores how serious the situation is. And the government's reason for doing this, they say it was because she attended a Hezbollah leader's funeral and supposedly expressed support for Hassan Nasrallah. So it raises these questions about, for the listener, about academic freedom and the potential for increased scrutiny of what international scholars are doing and what they believe.
And it wasn't just an isolated incident, right? I mean, the reports also mentioned the detention of Mahmoud Khalil, a Columbia graduate and green card holder, and then another Columbia student who had his visa revoked. So this suggests a potentially broader pattern of more stringent enforcement.
Yeah, exactly. I think these other cases, they contribute to this growing sense that immigration enforcement is becoming more rigorous, more unpredictable, even for people who have valid visas or permanent resident status. And this kind of environment can really have a chilling effect on the international academic community. It might discourage talented people from even wanting to study or work in the U.S.
And the reports also refer to a Dear Colleague letter that's been circulating that apparently uses some pretty strong language, specifically targeting university DEI policy. So how does this fit into the funding cuts that we talked about earlier and the broader changes that we're seeing?
Well, the Dear Colleague letter really signals, I think, a very clear intention from the administration to put pressure on universities to get rid of their DEI initiatives. And by explicitly linking these policies to the threat of losing federal funding, I mean, they're putting universities in a really tough spot. They have to try to balance their commitment to diversity and inclusion with the very real need to keep that federal funding coming in, which, as we said, is already facing big cuts.
And what about the emotional, the psychological impact on international students? The reports mention some data that's being tracked on international student sentiment. What does that data tell us about how these policies are affecting them?
Well, the data from the social sources is pretty concerning. They've seen a huge increase in in anxiety levels among prospective international students. I mean, reportedly a rise of over 12,269% by March 2025. And what's interesting, I think, is the shift in the sentiment from kind of an initial fear to a deeper sense of sadness.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these students are saying that they don't feel welcome in the U.S. higher education system anymore, and I think this could have real long-term consequences for the United States' reputation as a global destination for education.
So it sounds like, other countries might see this as an opportunity to attract more international students. I mean, Australia was mentioned specifically in the reports as a potential more welcoming alternative.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. You know, when the U.S. creates this environment of uncertainty, and there's this perception that it's not as welcoming to international students, than other countries that have, strong higher education systems can really step in and position themselves as more stable, more attractive options, and that could lead to a real shift in global student mobility patterns, with real economic implications for the U.S. as fewer international students choose to come here.
So the warning that was issued by professors at Yale Law School to international students really jumped out at me in these reports. They're basically saying, get back to the U.S. right now, or don't even leave. I mean, that sounds incredibly serious.
Yeah, it's a very serious warning, and I think it reflects the level of concern, within legal and academic circles based on what they're calling credible reports of an imminent travel ban, and they highlight the countries on the red list again. They specifically mention Bhutan in their warning, and they add Pakistan, Russia, and Haiti to the orange list. So it really highlights how broad the impact of these potential restrictions could be.
And they also mention a yellow list of about 21 nations, mostly in Africa, that are facing a 60-day security review. So it sounds like a huge range of countries and individuals could be affected in different ways by these changes.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this three-tiered system of restrictions is very complex, and it creates a lot of uncertainty and risk for people from a really significant number of countries. But the Yale professor's warning goes even beyond, just the listed nations. They're saying that all foreign nationals could face more scrutiny when they enter or re-enter the country. They could be asked very intrusive questions about their political beliefs. They specifically mention views on Palestinian issues, and they're warning that visas could be revoked based on these kinds of inquiries, which is really concerning, for academic freedom and the idea of open discourse that we usually value on university campuses.
And they also mentioned the January 20th executive order that required the State Department to identify countries with what they're calling inadequate vetting processes. And that report is due on March 21st. So it sounds like, that date could be a really critical turning point in terms of when these new policies might actually be implemented.
Yeah, March 21st, the deadline for that State Department report is definitely being seen as a key moment in the rollout of these new immigration restrictions. And the fact that the Yale professors issued their warning, just before this deadline, I think really suggests that there's a lot of anxiety within legal and academic communities about what that report might say and what might happen next.
Yeah, even civil rights organizations like the Council on American Islamic Relations, SAMIR, are getting involved. They're issuing their own travel advisories in response to these potential changes.
Yeah, that's right. The fact that CIR has issued this travel warning, urging people from the affected countries who are already legally in the U.S. not to leave the country for 30 days. It really underscores the level of fear and uncertainty that these policies are creating. It's a pretty unusual step for an organization like that to take, and I think it speaks to the level of alarm and the potential for real disruption in people's lives.
So to kind of bring this deep dive to a close for you, the listener, it's pretty clear that the U.S. higher education landscape is undergoing some really profound financial and policy shifts. And these changes could have far-reaching consequences, not just for the universities themselves and their financial stability, but also for students, both domestic and international students, and for the future of research and innovation in the United States. So this combination of federal funding cuts and much stricter immigration policies is creating a lot of uncertainty, that's going to shape the future of higher education, probably for years to come.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary. The way that these two issues are interconnected, the financial pressures and the restrictions on international exchange, it really does amplify the potential impact, on the whole system of higher education.
So as you think about, these really rapid changes, here's a final thought for you, the listener, to consider. How might the very idea of what a global education is, how might that need to change and adapt in light of this new landscape? And what proactive steps can individuals and institutions take to navigate this shifting reality? And then, bigger picture, what long-term impacts could these policies have on the United States standing as a global leader in education and innovation? It's a complex set of issues with potentially huge consequences, and we encourage you to keep exploring these developments. So thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
See you next time.
Yeah, see you.